Take it down, Logan. Halloween starts at 6. It's HOA policy. Karen's voice sliced through the crisp October air like a siren. She stood in the middle of Maplewood Lane, sunlight glaring off her gold HOA badge and that ridiculous clipboard she wielded like a sword. Kids froze mid-laughter, candy buckets dangling from their hands as the daylight Halloween display flickered behind me, carved pumpkins that shimmered instead of glowed. Their light dancing off mirrored panels. I didn't argue. I never do. I just smiled, letting her rant echo through the street while the sunlight traced perfect angles across my setup. Funny thing about daylight, it reveals everything people try to hide. They wanted control in the light? I'd give them a show they'd never forget. Maplewood Lane looked like the kind of neighborhood you'd see on a real estate brochure. Identical lawns, perfectly aligned mailboxes, and that eerie silence people mistake for peace. But under the bright October sunlight, you could feel the tension pulse like static. The only sound was the faint whir of leaf blowers and the occasional bark of orders from Karen, the HOA president, self-declared guardian of community order. To most, Karen was a force of nature, clipboard always in hand, blonde hair tied too tight, perfume so strong it announced her arrival before she did. To me, she was noise, loud, predictable, and oddly afraid of being unseen. I'd lived here 3 years. I'd learned one thing fast. You never win against the HOA by shouting. You win by smiling. This year, my project was simple, a daylight Halloween display. Kids in the neighborhood loved Halloween. But last year's nighttime chaos had led Karen to issue a new safety directive. No lights or loud activity past sunset. It ruins the image of Maplewood, she'd said at the meeting, chin raised like she was testifying before Congress. So I gave her what she wanted, a Halloween that shined only in sunlight. No cords, no power. Just mirrors, polished aluminum panels, reflective paint, and hundreds of carefully angled surfaces that caught sunlight and threw it in playful flashes across the lawns. Pumpkins shimmered instead of glowed, spiderwebs gleamed silver, and when the sun hit right, the whole yard looked like it was wrapped in gold. It wasn't spooky. It was beautiful. And it was driving Karen insane. She'd already made her rounds that morning, pacing like a mall cop in heels, writing warnings on neighbors' mailboxes for leaving pumpkins too close to the curb. Then she spotted mine. I was tightening a small mirror into the ground when her shadow fell across the grass. "Logan," she said sharply. "What exactly is this?" "Reflection art," I replied, brushing off dust from my hands. "All within guidelines. No lights, no cords, no external power source." Her lips pinched. "Halloween decor is not permitted before dusk." "Then it's not decor," I said simply. "It's an installation." Behind her, 2 kids watched from their bikes, whispering. She turned, glaring at them until they pedaled off. Then, realizing I wasn't reacting, she took out her phone and began snapping pictures of my yard. "I'll be bringing this up in the afternoon HOA review," she said. I smiled. "Perfect. I'll bring diagrams." Karen's heels clicked away down the sidewalk like punctuation marks of disapproval. As she left, I caught the faint reflection of her silhouette on one of the mirrors, warped, stretched and fragmented into a dozen versions of herself. It was poetic, really. That's when I knew what I was going to do. If she wanted control in broad daylight, then I'd make daylight her stage. By evening, the street would shimmer like a spotlight, and all eyes would be on Karen. By the next morning, Maplewood Lane looked like a movie set, too quiet, too staged, and too polished to be real. That usually meant one thing. Karen was making her rounds. I watched her from my porch as she strutted between driveways, clipboard in one hand, iced latte in the other. She stopped at every house that had so much as a hint of Halloween spirit. Plastic skeleton on the porch? Fine notice. Inflatable pumpkin on the lawn? Fine notice. Even the Jenkins wreath, black and orange ribbon, got a decor violation. By noon, half the neighborhood had small yellow slips pinned to their mailboxes like warning flags. I sipped my coffee and smiled. "She's escalating," I murmured. My phone buzzed. A message from my next-door neighbor, Jenna. She just fined me for having seasonal glitter on my steps. Is she serious? I typed back, don't worry. Let her keep going. The light hits hardest at noon. Because I'd already noticed something. Karen loved being on camera. Every time someone pulled out their phone to record her tantrums, she straightened up, changed her tone, started quoting bylaws like a politician at a press briefing. It wasn't about rules. It was about control and being seen controlling. So I started helping a few neighbors, quietly. I replaced their power cords with small mirrors, added reflective foil to fake cobwebs, and showed kids how to make shiny aluminum bats that flapped light instead of wings. The whole street began to shimmer in the sun like a mirage. Karen's Halloween-free Maplewood was becoming the most eye-catching street in the county. That afternoon, she stopped in front of my yard again. Her expression was taut, half fury, half disbelief. "Logan," she said, "you're encouraging non-compliance." I set down the wrench I'd been using to tighten a mirror stake. "I'm encouraging creativity," I said. "This isn't a competition." I looked at her deadpan. "Then why are you keeping score?" Her nostrils flared. She scribbled something on her clipboard and snapped a photo of my setup again. Behind her, sunlight hit the mirrored panels perfectly, scattering a dozen tiny reflections of her face across the street. Each one distorted, warped, gleaming. She turned around, blinking in the brightness, and for the first time, she looked unsure. "Careful," I said softly. "It's easy to lose yourself in the light." Karen scowled and stormed off, heels tapping the pavement. As she disappeared around the corner, I crouched back down, checking the alignment of my panels. They were perfect. At exactly midday, when the sun was highest, the reflections would bounce straight across Maplewood Lane, turning her daily patrol route into a hall of mirrors. And when she called another meeting to reassert HOA order, I'd make sure she couldn't hide behind shadows or rules. Daylight was my ally, and I was just getting started. By Thursday, the whole neighborhood was buzzing, and not just from the leaf blowers. Maplewood had become a daylight spectacle. Cars slowed down to look at the glimmering reflections bouncing between lawns. Kids rode their bikes through patches of light that shimmered like gold puddles. Everyone seemed to love it. Everyone except Karen. She doubled her patrols. Morning and afternoon now, always with her clipboard, her phone camera, and that expression like she was guarding the gates of heaven. She'd even started wearing sunglasses, but that only made her more meme-worthy. The HOA enforcer, as someone on the community group had labeled her in a post. I kept my composure. On the outside, I was just the friendly neighbor who liked solar experiments. On the inside, I was fine-tuning a system built for poetic justice. The plan was precise. I'd spent nights sketching angles and sunlight trajectories, calculating reflections like a scientist with a grudge. Each mirror and polished pumpkin had a purpose. Together, they'd form a chain of reflections that would focus perfectly at the HOA table during their Saturday meeting. When the sun hit at 12:04 p.m., Karen would be bathed in her own light, the literal centerpiece of her control. That Friday evening, I worked late, hammering stakes into the lawn. The neighborhood was quiet except for the rhythmic clang of metal and the hum of crickets. Every strike echoed through the street, a steady countdown to Saturday. I could feel her eyes even before I saw her. "Still at it, Logan?" Her voice sliced through the dusk. Karen stood across the street, arms folded. Her hair was loose this time, stress maybe. She wore her pastel blazer like armor. I tightened one last screw, not looking up. "You said no lights at night." "I'm using the time wisely." "You think this makes you clever?" I finally turned to face her. "No, just efficient." She took a step forward, her heels clicking sharply. "I could have your entire yard cleared by morning if I wanted. Then you'd have to explain why half the neighborhood supports me," I said quietly. "You've made enemies, Karen. People notice things when the sun's out." For a moment, she hesitated. The light from a nearby street lamp caught the corner of one of my mirrors, flashing across her face. A small, fleeting gleam that made her blink and look away. Then she turned abruptly and stormed off, muttering something about non-compliance reports. I watched her leave, a grin creeping onto my face. Every reflection was ready, every angle checked. Tomorrow was Halloween Day, and the HOA inspection would start at noon sharp. The sunlight would be brutal, perfect, inescapable. And for once, Karen wouldn't be the one shining. Halloween morning came dressed in sunlight and tension. The sky was clear, the air crisp, and the lawns of Maplewood Lane shimmered like polished mirrors. I'd been up since 7, checking alignments, tightening bolts, and adjusting my solar lenses for maximum precision. At 11:45 a.m., the first HOA members started gathering outside Karen's house, folding chairs, clipboards, coffee cups, the usual display of suburban self-importance. By noon, Karen was at the center of it all, beaming with false authority. The inspection was supposed to be routine. Every year, the HOA did a midday decorum check before the evening festivities. But this time there was nothing routine about it. I saw her point toward my house, voice raised even before she reached the curb. "Mr. Logan, you are in direct violation of Article 9, public disruption through reflective hazards." Her words echoed down the block. A few neighbors stepped outside to watch. Some smirked. Others whispered. Everyone felt it. The tension that had been brewing for a week was finally ready to boil. I stood on my porch, hands in my pockets. "Hazards?" I asked calmly. Your mirrors. They're blinding people." I glanced around. Kids rode their bikes. An elderly couple watered their flowers. No one looked blinded, just mildly entertained. Karen's jaw tightened. "You think this is funny? You're undermining community order." I stepped forward, voice steady. "You made the rule, Karen. No power cords. No electric lights." I followed it to the letter. She turned to her HOA committee, gesturing wildly. "He's mocking the board's authority." I couldn't help but smile. "No, I'm reflecting it." That line hit her harder than I expected. She froze, glaring as laughter rippled through a few neighbors. Her face flushed, matching the orange pumpkins around us. Then the sunlight shifted. Precisely 12:04 p.m. The mirrors on my lawn, the chrome pumpkins, and even the reflective foil on the fences came alive at once. A burst of dazzling light filled the street, not blinding but radiant. Every surface bounced sunlight into perfect alignment, scattering warm gold beams across the HOA setup like a natural spotlight. And at the center of it all stood Karen. Her sunglasses glinted, her badge shimmered, and her reflection multiplied across the street signs, windows, and even her own car door. It looked like the entire neighborhood was watching her from every angle. Gasps echoed. Phones came out. Someone whispered, "She's glowing." Another muttered, "No." "She's exposed." Karen spun around, trying to shield her face. "Turn it off. Turn it off right now." I shrugged. "Can't. The sun doesn't take orders." She stormed toward me, clipboard shaking. "You think you're clever, Logan? You're violating privacy!" "Everything's public, Karen," I said. "That's what you wanted. Transparency." That's when a police cruiser turned the corner, lights flashing faintly. The officer inside slowed down, clearly confused. Neighbors pointed, laughing quietly. Karen ran toward the car. "Officer! He's harassing me with light!" The officer raised an eyebrow, glancing at me, then at her, then at the sunlight sparkling like confetti. "Ma'am," he said, trying not to grin, "that's just the sun." The laughter that followed was unstoppable. Even the kids joined in. Karen's face crumpled, her voice breaking as she realized she had become the spectacle she feared most, the one everyone could see in perfect daylight, and I didn't have to lift a finger. The laughter rolled through Maplewood like thunder on a cloudless day. Karen stood frozen in the middle of the street, her clipboard hanging limp at her side as flashes of reflected sunlight painted her face. Phones were everywhere, neighbors recording, whispering, stifling giggles. Kids pointed from driveways. Someone even yelled, "Smile, Karen! You're trending!" She spun toward me, eyes wide. "You set this up. You humiliated me in front of my community." I tilted my head. "No, Karen, you did that yourself." The mirrors continued to shimmer as she moved, her reflection chasing her on every polished surface like a ghost she couldn't escape. The light was relentless, natural, pure. No buttons, no switches, no electricity. Just geometry, patience, and poetic justice. She rushed to her car, fumbling for the handle, but even the door glared back her reflection, multiplying her panic a dozen times over. The sunlight turned the whole SUV into a mirror of her fury. "Officer, arrest him!" she barked, spinning back toward the cop. The officer adjusted his shades, barely suppressing a grin. "For what, ma'am? Installing too many mirrors? He's harassing me." "With the sun?" he asked. The crowd chuckled again. Karen's shoulders stiffened. Her face flushed crimson. "This isn't over," she hissed at me. I smiled calmly. "Of course not. The HOA never rests, even when it's burning." She stormed toward her porch, tripping slightly as the light hit her again. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The self-proclaimed guardian of rules, undone by her own daylight regulations. Then came the moment I hadn't planned but secretly hoped for. From across the street, Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly neighbor Karen fined for seasonal glitter, yelled, "Hey Karen, thanks for sponsoring the show." Everyone turned, and there it was, the cherry on top. On one of the mirrored panels, the sunlight had caught the reflection of Karen's HOA van perfectly. Its logo, Maplewood HOA, protecting neighborhood values, appeared stretched across her chest like a glowing sash in the reflection. The symbolism was too much to ignore. Phones clicked. Videos rolled. Within minutes, someone posted, "HOA president turns into walking billboard during Halloween crackdown, Karen in the light." Notifications pinged across the block. I could practically hear the internet laughing. Karen froze as the realization hit her. She grabbed her phone, opened the HOA group chat, and began furiously typing until one by one her board members started leaving the chat. The sunlight was merciless. Every move she made caught in some reflection, each one a reminder that her control had dissolved the moment she tried to dictate the sun. When she finally disappeared inside, the crowd began clapping, not mocking applause and the kind that carried relief, release, and a quiet sense of victory. I just nodded to the officer, who gave me a small approving smirk before driving off. The light began to soften as clouds rolled in, but the neighborhood still sparkled faintly, like a memory caught in the air. Karen wanted to control the image of Maplewood. Now, she was the image, projected, multiplied, and shared everywhere, and I didn't even have to break a single rule. The next morning, Maplewood looked different. Not physically. Every lawn was still trimmed to perfection, every mailbox spotless. But the air was lighter, freer. The kind of quiet that follows after a storm that everyone secretly wanted to happen. I stepped outside with my coffee, the sunlight softer now, sliding gently over the reflective pumpkins that still stood on my lawn. The mirrors had done their job. Now they simply looked like art. My phone buzzed again and again. Dozens of messages, screenshots. Karen's meltdown had gone viral overnight. HOA president bans Halloween in daylight, ends up blinded by her own rules. Was trending locally. Even the town's Facebook group had changed its banner to a collage of Karen's angry reflection, caught mid-yell. I almost felt bad. Almost. Across the street, her porch lights were off. Curtains drawn. The HOA president sign had vanished from her yard. For the first time, the Queen of Rules had gone quiet. Mrs. Jenkins waved from her porch. "Morning, sunshine. Guess your mirrors worked better than a protest." "Guess so," I said, smiling. By noon, a few HOA board members arrived, not with clipboards, but cardboard boxes. They shuffled awkwardly up Karen's driveway and started carrying things out of her house. Her banners, files, that gold-framed HOA Excellence Award. I watched from afar, sipping my coffee. It didn't feel like victory, not entirely. It felt like balance, like sunlight finding its way back through years of shadow. Later that afternoon, as I was packing up my decorations, I heard hesitant footsteps. Karen. She looked human this time. No makeup, no sunglasses, just tired eyes and a stack of HOA notices clutched against her chest. "Logan," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "They voted me out," I nodded. "I figured." She took a deep breath, glancing at the glittering remnants of my Halloween display. "You knew exactly what you were doing, didn't you?" "Only what you taught me," I replied. "You said rules keep things in order. I just followed the sunlight rule." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, to my surprise, she almost smiled. "Maybe the neighborhood needed this. Maybe," I said. "Sometimes light fixes what rules can't." She gave one last look at her reflection in one of the silver pumpkins, tired but honest, then turned and walked away. No shouting, no threats, no clipboard. Just a woman finally stepping out of her own glare. As the sun began to set, families started gathering again, kids riding bikes, neighbors chatting freely, laughter drifting down the street. For the first time in years, Maplewood didn't feel like a place under watch. It felt like a community. I packed up the last of the mirrors but left one on the lawn facing the open street. Just enough to catch the final rays of light as the sky turned amber. The reflection shone across every house, faint but warm, a reminder that sometimes even daylight can be magic. Sunday morning arrived like a deep exhale. The air was still, cool, and golden, the kind of morning that made even Maplewood look innocent again. I stood at my porch watching sunlight glide across the lawns that used to be battlegrounds. No signs, no arguments, no tension. Just normal suburban peace, the kind that felt earned. Karen's house was quiet. Curtains open this time. A pumpkin sat on her porch, just one uncarved, but it was there. Maybe that was her way of saying truce. A group of kids biked past, shouting, "Hey, Mr. Logan, you're famous!" I laughed. I hope not for long. They sped off, their laughter echoing down the street, leaving tire tracks of normalcy. Later that day, I walked to the end of the block, where the HOA's bulletin board stood. The bold "Notice of Violation" header had been replaced by a handwritten sign, "Community Halloween BBQ, all welcome." Underneath, in smaller letters, "No rules today? Just light and fun." I traced the edge of the paper, smiling. Sunlight hit the glass cover of the board, scattering light in tiny rainbows. For the first time, Maplewood didn't need mirrors to shine. When I got back home, I sat on the steps with my coffee. My yard looked like a quiet reflection of the week's chaos. Stakes removed, decorations packed, only the single mirror pumpkin left, angled perfectly to catch the sunrise. It was almost poetic, my own reminder that you can't stop light. You can only decide what it reveals. Just then, my phone buzzed again. A message from the HOA's group chat. New HOA interim president, Jenna Roberts. Policy update. Holiday decorations permitted, as long as they bring joy. I chuckled softly. Progress, I muttered. At that moment, Karen's front door opened. She stepped out holding a tray. For a second, I thought it was paperwork again, but no, lemon bars. She hesitated, then crossed the street. "I figured," she said quietly. "It's time to bring something sweet instead of bitter." I accepted one, smiling. "Never thought I'd see the day." "Neither did I," she said, looking around the street. "But sunlight changes things." She was right. It did. We stood there for a while, two neighbors, sharing an awkward peace beneath a sky so bright it almost felt like forgiveness. By afternoon, laughter filled the neighborhood again. Kids painted pumpkins. Parents grilled burgers. Even the old HOA table, once Karen's command post, now held paper plates and lemonade cups. No rules. No fines. Just life. As the sun began to dip low, I turned to see my mirror pumpkin one last time. Its surface caught the final rays of light, sending one calm beam across the street, straight to Karen's porch. She noticed it, smiled faintly, and didn't look away. And just like that, Halloween, the day she tried to ban, became the brightest day Maplewood ever had. And that's how our neighborhood learned that sometimes the brightest revenge isn't about darkness and it's about light. If you enjoyed this story, like, share, and subscribe for more HOA drama. where karma always finds its way back.